with you as relates to the civil rights, the work of the commission, and some work that some of my former colleagues in the General Assembly are doing as relates to the issues of civil rights. You know, it would be very easy to assume the discussion of civil rights is a single issue and based on race. But it would be improper for me to ignore the civil rights includes the protection of all people, and one cannot be discriminated against based on race, color, disability, familial status, age, retaliation, origin, or religion. And to put it in numbers, as Brandy was talking about, the Ohio Civil Rights Commission in 2009, we received 6,489 charges came before the Civil Rights Commission. 71% were filed for reason other than race. So we simply look at civil rights through the narrow lens by which we sometimes look through. We must expand it so we can look at the notion of civil rights that protects and affords all of us in this great state. To put it in context, as to where we are today, we must embrace, acknowledge, and understand the past. Some of you, like myself, are acutely aware of the activities of the civil rights movement in the 50s and the 60s. I know I don't look that old, but I was around you. And today we use this term I never clearly understand called the post-civil rights era. You understand that? That's what we historians and all call it. But I would submit to you that something can't be post if it never ended in the first place. I would suggest to you that we are in the modern day civil rights movement, which movement for all people. We cannot talk about civil rights movement, whether past or the present, without acknowledging the teachings and the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King. And just let me give you one sidebar on that today, as in Washington, D.C., as the president eulogizes Dr. Dorothy Height, another great advocate, and Benjamin Hooks, who died earlier this month. Strong advocates in the nation developing civil rights. I think Dorothy Height met with every president, from President Roosevelt to President Obama in her lifetime. But Dr. King, we certainly have to go back and remember his magnificent speech in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, when he talked about the speech, talking about going to the mountaintop. And if you recall the historical lesson, you will know that in this speech he gave that night, he was assassinated. We've often reflected and pondered what the speech really meant. And some of the comments that he made that night basically said, well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I've often asked myself, have we reached this promised land? What would it look like if we could reach it? Do we think the promised land has fulfilled the dream of Dr. King? His other concept was that of the beloved community. Have we developed that beloved community? In 2010, can we say today that all citizens, regardless of their differences, have realized the promise? The facts will tell you that our significant disparities exist with respect to unemployment, rate of African American and Latinos Americans, as well as many other indicators, we would all expect to see progress. But we don't see that much. On the average, women still make a fraction of the wages earned by male counterparts for the same job. When we look at hate crime statistics, there were 7,783 reported hate crimes in 2008, more than 1,000 against Jews, more than 3,000 against African Americans, and more than 1,600 on the basis of sexual orientation. In my humble opinion, regardless of how you define the contours of the promised land or the beloved community, we have not reached it, and there remains a great deal of work left for us to do. Civil rights legislation and public policy advancements have in fact given millions of citizens a real chance at living the American dream, owning a home, and having the ability to earn a living. However, as the Civil Rights Commission, the dream has still not been realized. And I'll give you a good example of what Michael and the members of the commission did before I arrived. There was the Zanesville water case, deprived running water for the residents in Zanesville. What is more disturbing, we won that case, by the way, to have running water for the residents of Zanesville. But what was even more disturbing is after the federal judge, Judge Marbury, issued the decision, the defendants issued a statement to members of the media claiming the ruling, the guarantee to provide running water to every resident in this town, and the restoration of basic civil rights amounted to a sad day for civil rights in the state of Ohio. Ask ourselves, have we seen the progress? Some might even suggest that the election of President Obama as President of the United States significant, and I agree with that. Senator Kearney got me involved in the campaign early. The beginning of a post-racial era in our country. Do we believe this to be true? The election of President Obama is probably by many standards one of the largest, best examples of progress made in our country. However, I do not think the election in and itself equates to a post-racial era in our country.